Nice to see you again. Today we are talking about Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. This is a war poem. In our today's discussion, we shall be looking at the poem at a glance. There will be notes and the summary of the poem will be given here in English. Then there will be discussion of the text in Nepali and we will be giving you the comments of the poem, and finally the lesson will be wrapped with reader's review. Okay, so I am sure you will accompany me till the end of this video. If you are new to my channel, I request you heartily to subscribe my channel. If you think this video is worth watching, please recommend your friends and fellows. Okay, here we go. There is a poem, Anthem for Doomed Youth, and let's have a look at a glance. It's a poem by Wilfred Owen. It was published in 1920. It's in Petrarchan model. The theme of the poems are horrors of war, death and suffering, nationalism, ritual remembrance, so many things. And here is a quick comment. The poem laments the loss of youth in war and describes the sensory horrors of combat. It criticizes the usual forms of ritual and tribute used to commemorate people who have died in war. It's not saying that these rituals don't have their place, but rather that they are not enough in the face of war's horrors. In the second stanza, the poem presents memory, kindness and gratitude of as more fitting memorials. Okay. Here are explanatory notes for you to derive the meaning, and these numbers in the left side indicate the line number. As the poem is a sonnet, it has 14 lines, so the numbers are there, and the discussions and pure notes for you to get the meanings are there. Okay, so here is a picture of the soldiers who are going with their logistics to fight in the war, and those people who are at home, they have to say only adieu. These young soldiers who are fighting at the front may not be back again, and this will be their first and final goodbye or adieu. Okay, here is a summary of the poem. Death bells can carry no tribute to the young soldiers killed in the war. The rattle of the guns and rifles rather offer this. No prey would now rest them in peace. The fray is a mockery for them. It is the cells mourning them. Similarly, the beagles from the war field present them a salute. No candles are suitable to carry the dead bodies to the grave. The eyes of the young, not the candle in their hands, gives a signing farewell to the martyrs. The sweethearts of the dead are sucked to the brows, so sucked in the coffin. The flowers are offered to the dead as the token of their sweethearts' passions. Like the windows curtain display the evening darkness, darkness falls in the life of the sweetheart too. The dusk of ending of the day will be slow because people will be remembering their loved ones. Always they have their eyes filled with tears. Okay, this is the summary of the text in English. Now let us discuss the text in Nepali. दिवंगत किशोरप्रति समाधि धुन विल्फ्रेड ओवेन. विल्फ्रेड ओवेन प्रथम विश्वयुद्धमा पैदल सैनिक अधिकृतको हैसियतमा सामेल भएका थिए. उनी युद्ध पनि लडेका थिए. आफ्नो बहादुरीका लागि उनी सम्मानित पनि भएका थिए. तर दुःखको कुरा, युद्ध विराम हुनु एक हप्ता अघि उनले वीरगति प्राप्त गरेको थिए. यस कवितामा ओवेनले युद्धमा सहभागी भएको सैनिकको दृष्टिकोणबाट युद्धको वर्णन गरेका छन्. तर उनी यहाँ प्रत्यक्ष सहभागी भएको भन्दा पनि टाढाबाट चाहिँ युद्धको पृष्ठभूमिलाई केलाको जस्तो देखिन्छन्. त्यहाँ लड्ने सिपाहीको मनस्थिति, वीरगति प्राप्त हुने सैनिकको दुर्गति, अङ्गभङ्ग भएका सैनिकको दर्दनाक पीडा जनावर मरेसरी भक्लक तिनीहरू मानिसको मृत्युवरण हुने युद्धको भयानक कोलाहल र डरलाग्दो तस्बिर, बन्दुकको नालबाट निस्कने गोलीको आवाज र त्यसले जस्तोसुकै बहादुर र शक्तिशाली सैनिक हुँ भन्नेको मनमा सिर्जना हुने सम्वेग, त्यसमा भय, त्रास र आतंक, अनि मानवता गुमेको अवस्था, कोकोहोलो लगायतका कुरा एकातिर छन् भने अर्कातिर राष्ट्रियता, स्वाधीनता, गौरव, वीरगति, समाधि अनि भगवानसँगको मृत्यु सैनिकको आत्माको चिर शान्तिको प्रार्थना सहित गिर्जाघरमा बजाइने बिगुल, घन्टी, प्रेयसीले चढाउने फुलका गुच्छा, सदाको विदाईको लागि हल्लाएका हातहरू, तिनका आँखाबाट झरिरहेका बलिन्दा र आँसु अनि शोकका गीतहरू सबै भाव विहोलको अवस्था वास्तवमा कसैले देख्नु पनि नपरोस्, सुन्नु पनि नपरोस्, भन्नु पनि नपरोस्, भोग्न पनि नपरोस्। यस्तो आखिर युद्ध सिपाहीको बहादुरी देखाउने स्थल हो भनिन्छ। यो भन्नु चाहिँ उनीहरूको लागि खिसी ट्युरी गर्ने जस्तो कुरा हो। यो मानवीय गतिविधि हो भने यस्तो कुरा दिवंगत किशोरहरूले कसरी बुझ्न चाहेर पनि बुझ्न सकेनन्, किनकि उनीहरू युद्धका लागि सैनिक पेसामा भर्ना भएका थिए र हुन्। सैनिक युद्धका लागि भर्ना भएको भनेको युद्धमा लड्ने हो, तिनीहरूलाई चाहिँ घर राखेर सरकारले तलब दिने होइन। उनीहरूले चाहिँ राष्ट्रको लागि लड्नुपर्छ, राष्ट्रको लागि शहीद हुनुपर्छ, शहादत प्राप्त गर्नुपर्छ। अब उनीहरूको मरेको उनीहरूको चाहिँ जीवन भनेको राष्ट्रको लागि हो भन्ने त्यसरी चाहिँ भावना उनीहरूमा भरेर अनि उनीहरू त्यसमा युद्ध मैदानमा लड्न गएका हुन्। उनीहरू त्यसबाट भाग्न सक्दैनन्। आफ्नो राष्ट्र र त्यसको गौरवका लागि उनीहरूले बलिदान दिनुपर्छ, शहादत प्राप्त गर्नुपर्छ, अरू कुरा सबै व्यर्थ हुन्। यसरी चाहिँ तिनीहरू लड्नुपर्छ। तर लड्दाखेरिका यो युद्धभूमिमा हुने कुराहरू चाहिँ यो बाहिर बसिने मान्छेहरूले व्याख्या गरे जस्तो होइन। यस्तै खालको कविता कथा चाहिँ यो अर्नेस्ट हेमिङवेले पनि लेखेका छन्। उनी पनि युद्धमा सहभागी भएर चाहिँ त्यहाँको अनुभव गरेको हुनाले उनले पनि त्यस्ता चाहिँ युद्धका विकृति विसङ्गतिहरू चाहिँ सबै कुराहरू चाहिँ आफ्नो कृतिहरूमा चाहिँ छरेका छन्। अब दिवंगत किशोरप्रति समाधि धुन एक आधुनिक कविता हो। 20औं शताब्दीको दोस्रो दशकमा भएको विनाशकारी पहिलो विश्वयुद्धमा मारिएका किशोरप्रति बेलायती कवि विल्फ्रेड ओवेनले एक चर्चित युद्ध कविता रचना गरे। यो कविताको संशोधन गर्नको लागि, यसको चाहिँ एउटा विषयवस्तु र शीर्षक सबै मिलाउनको लागि विल्फ्रेड ओवेनले आफ्नो साथी सिगफ्रेड ससुनलाई पनि जिम्मा दिएका थिए। उनी अस्पतालमा बिरामी भएको बेलामा उनीहरू दुईजनाको बिचमा मित्रता भयो र त्यही बेलामा चाहिँ उनले विल्फ्रेड ओवेनले सिगफ्रेड ससुनलाई चाहिँ आफ्नो कविता हेर्न लगाएर अनि त्यसको चाहिँ एउटा आवश्यक संशोधन पनि गर्न संशोधन गरी अनि उपयुक्त शीर्षक चयन गर्न दिएकोमा अनि सिगफ्रेड ससुनले पनि यसको शीर्षक एन्थेम फर डुम्ड युथ भनेर सिफारिस गरे। त्यही अनुसार यो प्रकाशित भयो 1920 मा। र अनि अहिले हामी अब युद्धको कविताको चर्चा गर्ने क्रममा यो अङ्ग्रेजी साहित्यमा मात्र होइन अन्य साहित्यहरूमा पनि यसको अनुवाद भएर यसको व्यापक चर्चा हुने गरेको छ। यो युद्ध कविताको एउटा चाहिँ उत्कृष्ट नमुना हो भन्नमा फरक पर्दैन। त्यसो भएर युद्धको विसङ्गति विकृतिहरू मान्छे आफू त्यही भोगेर पनि तर चाहिँ आफूलाई चाहिँ पर त्यो त्यहाँबाट अलिक पर भएको दृष्टिकोणबाट उनले चाहिँ विल्फ्रेड ओवेनले यहाँ रचना गरेका हुन् र त्यसरी प्रस्तुत गरेका छन्। यो कविता इटालियली कवि पेट्रार्कको 14 हरफे कविता सोनेटको ढाँचामा लेखिए पनि बेलायती सोनेट संरचना अनुसारको अनुप्रास मिलाएको छ। यस कवितामा कवि ओवेनले आफ्नै किसिमले श्रद्धाञ्जली व्यक्त गर्छन्। मान्छेको लास घाट लैजाँदा घण्ट बजाउने चलन छ, तर यी भुक्लुक्क पशु सरह मर्ने सेनाको लागि घाटे घन्टीको कुनै अर्थ छैन। मात्र विकराल क्रोधयुक्त बन्दुक र परर पड्काएका राइफल र उनीहरूले शान्ति प्रार्थना गर्न सक्लान्। अब तिनलाई यस्ता कुराले खिसी गर्ने होइन, तिनका निम्ति प्रार्थना गर्ने वा घण्ट बजाउने पनि होइन। शोक गीत गाएर केही हुनेवाला छैन। तिनका लागि त घरैबाट कोकोहोलो रोदन र शोक विह्वल युद्ध क्षेत्रबाट बजिरहेको एउटा बिगुलले शोक व्यक्त गर्छ। यिनका लास लैजान अब घाट ओसार्ने युवाहरूको मैनबत्ती बोकाइको पनि केही अर्थ छैन। विदाईको भाव विह्वलता हातमा होइन, ती युवाहरूको आँखामा झल्किरहेको छ। मर्ने केटाका प्रेयसीका निधारमा झल्केको शोक नै यथार्थमा कात्रो हो। प्रेयसीले चढाएका फूल ती युवतीका धैर्यताका मगजका कोमलताका प्रतीक हुन्। साथै प्रत्येक सुस्तरी ढल्ने साँझ अन्धकार शोकका निम्ति पर्दा हुन्। यो कविता युद्ध, मानवता विरोधी, मानवीयता गुमाएको कारण रणसङ्ग्राम सुरु भई त्यसमा आफ्नो जीवन गुमाउन बाध्य असङ्ख्य युवाहरू प्रति समर्पित रचना हो। यस्तो कोकोहलो रोदन, विकराल, क्रोधयुक्त बन्दुक र परर गोली वर्षाउने राइफलका कारण सिर्जित भएकोले यो जति सक्दो चाँडो अन्त हुनुपर्छ भन्ने भाव बोकेको कविता हो। राष्ट्रियता, धार्मिक आस्था, युद्ध जस्ता विषयवस्तु भए पनि कविले यो युद्ध गतिलो चिज होइन, युद्ध गतिलो गतिविधि होइन होला। यो राजनीति गर्नेहरूको लागि चाहिँ होला, त्यहाँ चाहिँ पैसा कमाएर सेनामा भर्ना भएर पैसा कमाउँछु भनेर चाहिँ एउटा भाडामा सिपाही खरिद गर्ने र भाडामा गएर चाहिँ त्यहाँ युद्धमा लड्नेहरूको लागि हुनसक्छ। तर वास्तवमा युद्ध लड्ने चिज होइन। यो विध्वंसकारी, विनाशकारी र यो मानव संहारकारी, मानवको पुस्ता नै, वंश नै, मानव एउटा जाति नै संहारकारी एउटा चाहिँ मानवीय गतिविधि हो। यो मानवका कारणले सिर्जित कुरा हो र मानवकै चाहनामा अथवा मानवकै आवश्यकताले फेरि शान्तिमा परिणत पनि हुने हो नि त। अब लियो टल्स्टोयले वार एन्ड पिसमा लेखेका छन्, तिमी शान्ति चाहन्छौ भने युद्धको सुरुवात गर। हो, त्यस्तै शान्त चाहनेलाई युद्ध छेड्ने र अनि पछाडि चाहिँ मान्छे आत्तिएपछि अनि शान्त हुन खोज्छ भने जस्तै यहाँ कविले एउटा युद्धको विभीषिका, युद्धमा रमाएर लड्न जाने होइन युवाहरू, युद्ध वास्तविक रूपमा चाहिँ लड्ने कुरो पनि होइन, त्यसबाट हामी परै बस्नुपर्छ भन्ने भावना कविले चाहिँ व्यक्त गर्न खोजेका छन्। द्याट्स अल with the discussion of the poem in Nepali. Now, here are comments. Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen highlights the brutality of war and is considered an anti-war poem. It is a bitterly ironical sonnet about a generation of young men destined to die in the battlefield. The poem deals with death in conflict. The poem describes memorial tributes to dead soldiers, ironically comparing the sounds of war to the choirs and bells which usually sound at the funerals. The tone of Owen's poem is ironic and anger, as it shows how war is nothing like the portrayal as ironic did in Alexander Pope's poem. The poem describes memorial tributes to the soldiers who die in the war. The poem ironically compares the sounds of war and the choirs that come through the battlefield. Okay. It also compares familiar funeral practices to break farewells of young men who should have their whole lives in front of them. In doing so, Wilfred Owen seems to show the futility of religion at this time, while also demonstrating the brutality of war. In the first stanza, the speaker asks, "What passing bells, the bell ringing we are accustomed to hearing at funerals? They are for slaughtered soldiers." The remainder of the stanza is an angry response to the question with the various brutal sounds of war, including gunshots and shells, being compared ironically to choirs, prayers and bells. In the second stanza, the speaker asks where the candles are to speed them all. The ceremonial aspects of funeral, such as candles and flowers, are shown to be absent in the stanza. Instead, Owen shows how these rituals of death are replaced by grieving gulls left behind and the darkness descending as the soldiers die on the battlefield. The title of the poem, Anthem for Doomed Youth, makes Owen's intentions clear. It was apparently suggested by his fellow war poet Siegfried Sassoon while he was in hospital. It sets up the religious theme with the term anthem, which suggests church music. The word anthem in the title of the poem has two meanings. It can refer to a rousing song used by a certain group of team. Think of football or national anthem, for example. It can also refer to music set to a religious reading which is sung by a choir during some Christian services. This double meaning could be used ironically here, as the poem rejects the rousing propaganda that glorified war and also questions the usefulness of religious ceremonies and practices when soldiers die for their nation. The word doomed suggests that these men are already dead and implies little hope before we even read the poem. Finally, the word youth seems used in the poem to remind us how young and innocent these soldiers were, making their futile deaths and all the more poignant. Owen asks what candles may be held to spirit them all. He responds by contrasting various familiar religious practices with the realities of a lonely death in the trenches. The poem itself takes the form of a sonnet, often used to phrase or alleviates, seems ironic in its use here, as the poem is a lament for the brutal deaths of young innocent men. Roughly speaking, these address the front and then the home front respectively, the men who have died as cattle and the women left behind, the girls whose pallor shall be their fell. Okay. Wilfred Owen served in the army as an infantry officer. He was awarded for bravery and was killed a week before the armistice. In this poem, Owen's view is that of someone who is personally involved in the war. Though the poem seems to be written by an outsider at the first glance, but it is the poet's way of distancing himself from the horrors of war. The rhymes are largely monosyllabic and heavy. They emphasize the sad tone. Cattle and rattle are the rhymes, or being to different effects simultaneously. If one stands for the slaughter of soldiers like cattle, the other stands for repeating the process of slaughter by sounds of shooting. The experience of war is contrasted with religion and church services. Although a war poem, its tone is serious and pathetic. When we read the words like candle, beagle, galls, or flowers, they all evoke our seriousness. The first 8 lines or octave of the poem contains many sounds. The poem deals with the battlefield, but at times it takes far away from it to the house, windows, darkness, and mourning for the dead of the house, dead in the house. The poem is on the cortege of mourning procession. So, especially the poem is about war and its devastation, and the poet is distancing himself from the effects of war, because he doesn't like to be coming into interact with the war and its horror, the panic striken, the horror striken, the death striken, the devastating and destructive war that is doing politics in another way. War is doing politics in another way, but for those people who fight in the war, that's not good. And glorifying the soldiers for their bravery, valor, all these are nonsense. Everything that is important is the sake of humanity, that humanity matters, not the cruelty. Okay, here is the reader's review. Anthem for Doomed Youth is a World War I poem by Wilfred Owen. about the inhuman deaths of young English soldiers far from home. The poem begins by using traditional, even ancient elements of the funeral services these men want to receive, like church bells, prayers, and choirs, to describe the sounds of guns, rifles, and mortar shells. Because they die on the European continent, many English soldiers cannot have proper funerals, and those they left behind can only mourn without the rituals that make mourning more bearable. Those on the home front cannot even be sure that their loved ones will return. Okay, that's all with today's discussion of Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. I'm sure you got the points. If you are new to my channel, please I request you again to subscribe my channel, and if this channel is worth watching, please recommend your friends, and I shall be back with other educational videos. Till then, have a nice time. Thank you for your patience and time.